In this series of videos, we're going to be focusing entirely on the structural and functional nature of the heart, which is the central organ of the circulatory system that allows blood to be transported around the body to where it needs to go. Now, the way that the heart does this is it actually contracts and relaxes its tissues on the inside in order to squeeze blood out of it and cause blood to be pumped around the body. Now, given that the heart can actually contract and relax, we can infer that most of the heart is made of muscle tissue. In fact, if we look at the cross-section of the heart here, this entire layer, which is orangish red in color, is a special type of muscle that is found only in the heart, which is what we call myocardium or myocardial tissue. We can see from the word myocardium that the root of this word is cardiac, which is an adjective that means pertaining to or related to the heart, and myo is a prefix that indicates relation to muscle, so myocardium is literally heart muscle. On the inside, the structural tissues that give the heart its characteristic shape are what we call endocardium. So endo is a prefix that obviously means inside, and this again functions as actual structural tissue, or perhaps it's more accurate to call it connective tissue, in that it holds the myocardium in the proper place to allow it to contract, and the outermost layer that basically functions as protective tissue and also keeps the outside of the heart lubricated in order to reduce friction is what we call the pericardial tissue, or simply the pericardium. And peri, from the English word perimeter, is a prefix that means around or on the outside of a particular structure. So now that we've covered the composition in terms of tissue structures of the heart, we can take a look on the inside and get a basic idea about how blood actually moves within the heart. So, as we'll take a look at in future videos where we look at blood flow and blood vessels in more detail, we can see that blood enters the heart this way through a blue blood vessel, meaning that this blood vessel contains deoxygenated blood. So this deoxygenated blood, meaning this blood carries carbon dioxide, ultimately we need to get this blood to the lungs. So this carbon dioxide is the carbon dioxide that has been collected from all of the cells in the body that have released their carbon dioxide so that it can be exhaled. So the major blood vessel that brings blood into the heart is what we call the vena cava or vena cava, depending on your pronunciation. This is what we call the superior vena cava, meaning the vena cava from above the heart, and down here, this half of the vena cava is what we call the inferior vena cava, that simply means from below. And the vena cava allows deoxygenated blood to enter the first chamber of the heart, which is what we call an atrium. Atria here is the plural form of this word, and the singular form would be the atrium. Now, from there, from the atrium, the deoxygenated blood drains down into a large chamber here, which is what we call a ventricle. So the bottom of the heart, the two chambers at the bottom of the heart are what we call your ventricles, and the two chambers where blood enters the heart are what we call your atria. Now, included between the heart chambers are special barriers that we call valves. These valves function similarly to sphincters in the digestive system, in that their primary function is to prevent blood from flowing backwards, which means when the deoxygenated blood from the vena cava enters this atrium here, this valve is going to open up and allow the blood to drain downward, but then this valve will close immediately so that when this blood is pumped out of the heart into this blood vessel here, the blood doesn't flow backward into the atrium on this side. And heart valves fall into one of two categories. So this valve that connects the top atria. So there's one valve here and one valve on the other side of the heart. So these two valves we can see are connecting the atria and the ventricles of the heart, and naturally atria starts with the letter A and ventricle starts with the letter V, and therefore we can call them AV valves, which is short for atrioventricular valves. Although, as we will learn, each of these two valves has a specific name depending on their structure. Now, we can see that the other major chambers of the heart have valves that lead out of the heart. So we can actually see one of these valves right here, and we can see that the flaps of the valves, so these valves would actually push open when blood flows out, meaning that if blood flows backward, these valves would not be able to open this way, and therefore these valves serve the same function, albeit with a different mechanism that stops blood from being able to flow back into the heart. And because of this characteristic half circle or half moon shape, we refer to these as what we call the semilunar valves. Semilunar literally means half moon, and if we draw the shape of a half moon, something like this, also a half circle, we can see it resembles the shapes of the semilunar valves like this. Now, the final structural piece of the heart that we need to identify is that the heart is not actually symmetrical. We can see that there is a right half here, so this is actually the right side of the heart, and this is the left side of the heart here. So this is a little bit mind-blowing because, again, the right side of the heart is on the left side of this page, and the left side of the heart is on the right side of this page. However, if you take your hand out and overlay the heart with where your heart is, you will find that this side is on the left-hand side of your body, and this side here is on the right side of your body. And there is an easily defined feature right here that separates the right side and the left side, which is a structure that we call the septum. And the septum's job, as previously mentioned, is to physically separate the right and left sides of the heart, because ultimately the directions of blood are completely different. So the job of the right side of the heart is to take deoxygenated blood and pump it out of the heart towards the lungs of the body, whereas the left side of the heart's job is to take blood that comes from the lungs that has received oxygen and pump it out of this blood vessel here. So we can see that because the blood leaving this blood vessel here is red colored, this is clearly oxygenated blood, and this blood is going to the rest of the body in order to supply the cells in your body with the oxygen that they need. And the blood vessel that carries blood out of the heart is a blood vessel that we call the aorta. Now that you've been introduced to the structural components of the heart, in the next video we'll be taking a more detailed look of the exact pathway of blood through the heart in order to ensure that we can understand what the function of the right side and the left sides of the heart are, and how each of the halves work together in order to ensure that blood gets where it needs to go.